So good morning, everyone. My name is Maddie, and I'm a volunteer with Indigenous Physical Activity and Cultural Circle. So before we begin, just a friendly reminder that all sessions will be recorded. And for those of you online today, we ask that you please keep your videos and microphones off during this session. So today I'll be introducing Dr. Rosalin Miles and Kai Kaufman. So I'm going to first introduce Kai Kaufman. So Kai Kaufman is a fourth-generation Canadian who grew up on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsawwassen, Musqueam, and other Coast Salish peoples. She completed her undergraduate degree and graduate degree in kinesiology at the University of British Columbia. She currently works as a graduate research coordinator for the Indigenous Health and Physical Activity Program and the Indigenous Studies and Kinesiology Program at UBC, where she has been fortunate to learn from Indigenous elders, knowledge keepers, mentors, and community members. Kai is passionate about the promotion of holistic health and wellness and has been actively involved in the co-creation and implementation of various community-based initiatives that honor community aspirations surrounding holistic health and wellness. So today, Dr. Rosalin Miles and Kai Kaufman will be presenting the importance of honoring clean air to strengthen connections to holistic health and wellness.
Thank you, Maddie. Get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Second. So I'd just like to start off in a good way today and acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Wholistic First Nation. We will also like to acknowledge that the Indigenous Physical Activity and Cultural Circle and the Indigenous Health and Physical Activity Program at the University of British Columbia Point Grey campus are situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. So this project was developed in partnership with, between the Indigenous Physical Activity and Cultural Circle and the Indigenous Health and Physical Activity Program at the University of British Columbia. And the Indigenous Health and Physical Activity Program is led by Dr. Darren Warburton, Dr. Shannon Braden, and Dr. Rosalin Miles, and it also includes a team of staff and graduate and undergraduate students as well. We would also like to express our appreciation to the Lytton First Nation and the Health and Fitness Society of BC for their ongoing dedication and support on this project, as well as the additional support from the Environment and Climate Change of Canada and the Health and Health Canada on this project. So just as a brief background, our team began this project in 2018 in consultation with the Lytton First Nation community. And the aim of this initiative was to co-create and share culturally relevant messaging surrounding air quality with Indigenous communities. So as you may know, Lytton is located in the interior of BC, and Lytton First Nation is located on over 14,000 acres of land. So Lytton is known as Canada's hotspot with extremely dry and hot climate, and is susceptible to high winds and thunderstorms. So as you may know, in July of 2021, Lytton experienced a devastating wildfire. So the Lytton First Nation community continues to live with the impacts of the wildfire today. To support the healing of Lytton First Nation, it's important to honor clean air as a way to strengthen connections to holistic health and wellness during this time. So we are honored to be learning and engaging in the exchange of knowledge and dialogue with the Lytton First Nation community in the co-creation of this project. Oops, sorry. So after initial consultation with the Lytton First Nation community, our team conducted an environmental scan, and the results highlighted that the air quality within many Indigenous communities across Canada were not being monitored, particularly for within rural and remote Indigenous communities. So many Indigenous communities happen to be in close proximity to industrial sectors, and many houses still rely on heavily on wood burning stoves and fireplaces as well. Just one second here. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. So the exposure to poor air quality can lead to health complications, especially for elders, children, and those living with pre-existing health conditions. So it is important to increase the awareness and knowledge surrounding the importance of air quality to support the health of the future 7 generations. So this is the Air Quality Health Index, and it was created to provide information to those living in Canada on local air quality conditions and associated short-term health risks using an air quality monitor. So the AQHI values were calculated by monitoring 3 common air pollutants, which includes ground level ozone, fine particulate matter, and nitrogen oxides. So air quality is reported on a scale of 1 to 10 and 10 plus, with 1 being low risk and with 10 being very high risk. So the AQHI can be found online or can be accessed through an app as well. So the AQHI helps to guide and make recommendations to limit the exposure to poor air quality conditions and can help to support holistic health and wellness by reporting current and future air quality conditions. So based on the current and forecasted AQHI, individuals can use the scale to determine if it is safe to participate in outdoor activities or if they should consider modifying or reducing or postponing these activities. So for example, an AQHI reading between 1 to 3 is considered low risk, where individuals can enjoy their usual outdoor activities, but above 10 is considered very high risk, where strenuous outdoor activities should be avoided, and especially children and elders should also avoid outdoor physical exertion. And it's also important to highlight that exercising, engaging in traditional and land and water-based activities during times of poor air quality can impact holistic health and wellness. And it's also important to note that exercise capacity is also limited with exposure to poor air quality. So while there are many benefits associated with physical activity, during periods of poor air quality, there are also potential health risks, particularly for those who are most sensitive to being in poor air quality conditions. However, the AQHI does have some limitations. So the AQHI rating may not be an accurate reading for rural and remote communities due to the lack of air quality monitoring in these communities. So it may not offer the AQHI score from an air quality monitor stationed, or sorry, it may only offer the AQHI score from an air quality monitor that's stationed probably like hundreds of kilometers away. And we also recognize that the AQHI does not consider a holistic view of health and wellness. And it also doesn't consider the spiritual, emotional, mental, or physical well-being recommendations. And throughout this project, our team facilitated community sharing circles with the Lytton First Nation community to share feedback on air quality and the impacts on holistic health and wellness. So in the sharing circles, community members shared that spiritual ceremony sites are safe and can be used to practice cultural ways. Families can maintain outdoor activities and enjoy harvesting and gathering food together. And engaging in physical activity outdoors is safe when air quality conditions were considered good. And during times of poor air quality conditions, community members also shared some thoughts. So there were increased levels of stress and barriers for people to socialize within the community. The mental health community members were also negatively impacted as well. And of course, people are also limited in exchange of knowledge with others. And based on these community sharing circles, there were also several key themes and recommendations surrounding air quality and monitoring that were identified. So this includes the community express aspirations surrounding increasing the accessibility of air quality monitors and educational resources surrounding the AQHI in a culturally safe and appropriate way. And the AQHI relevant health messaging resources should be available online as well as posted within the community, such as like a visual board. And preventative measures should also be taken to limit the exposure to poor air quality as well. And finally, it was also recommended that there should be educational workshops within the community just to help support health and wellness as a whole. So our team also co-created an AQHI survey just to gain feedback from the Lytton First Nation community surrounding air quality monitoring and the existing AQHI messaging. So when asked if the air quality health index was available for the Lytton First Nation community, almost everyone responded that they didn't know or that it wasn't actually available. And everyone who answered the survey did not know how to actually access the AQHI for personal use or for the community. There was also feedback that the AQHI reporting should be made accessible for the Lytton area. At that time, the closest nearby was in Kamloops, which is about 200 kilometers northeast of Lytton. And then finally, there should be opportunities to learn more about local air quality conditions and the AQHI messaging within the community as well. And this specific medicine wheel was created based on feedback from the community members, and this highlights how poor air quality impacts holistic health and wellness. So for example, community members stated that poor air quality impacted spiritual health by the inability to practice connections to the land and the community. Anxiety of wildfires, may not be able to see that. I'll just read that out. Anxiety of wildfires in the community and the fear of the impact on health was tied into emotional well-being. Reduced motivation and assessing personal risk and family risk was tied with potential effects to mental well-being. And finally, fatigue and respiratory conditions may affect physical and health and well-being. So from the community feedback and sharing circle dialogues, the Indigenous Education Toolkit for Understanding Air Quality and the Impacts on the Health and Well-being was created and finalized in 2020. This toolkit was created by IPAC in partnership with the UBC Indigenous Health and Physical Activity Program and with Lytton First Nation. And this educational toolkit aims to assist Indigenous communities to better understand current quality of outdoor air and its effects on holistic health and well-being. And this toolkit is freely available online on IPAC's website as well. And this toolkit highlights information and tips that are shared to provide recommendations that minimize potential health risks and ways to improve the quality of outside air as well. There are also worksheets created that have topics for sharing circle discussions designed to ignite dialogue about aspirations of community members on how to address air quality conditions. And finally, this infographic highlights an AQHI scale that was co-created with the community, and it's also included in the toolkit as well. So this was designed just to steer away from that more colonial and linear approach. The circular shape was intended to symbolize the medicine wheel as a reminder that air quality impacts holistic health and wellness. So that's just an overview of what our team has been working on, and we're still continuing to refine based on community aspirations moving forward. And our team is still currently actively involved in developing various resources for Indigenous communities surrounding air quality health messaging. And I'll now pass it off to Dr. Miles to present and reflect on sacred teachings and the connections between holistic health and wellness and clean air.
So I'd like to introduce Dr. Rosalin Miles. Dr. Rosalin Miles is a member of Lytton First Nation. She completed her education doctoral degree in curriculum and instruction with a major in exercise science and her graduate certificate in nonprofit management at the University of Central Florida. She completed her master's degree in human kinetics, specializing in coaching science at UBC, and a bachelor's degree majoring in physical education at Trinity Western University, and a diploma in physical education at Langara College. Dr. Miles has a combined 35 years of experience in sports, fitness, education, and health fields as a Division I level NCAA level coach, registered kinesiologist, active release therapist, college and university instructor, research writer, awarded certified strength and conditioning specialist, and as a national level athlete. She has trained and developed Olympic and national level athletes and has motivated the general population to achieve personal goals. Dr. Miles is currently the First Nations Advisor and Research Associate for the Indigenous Health and Physical Activity Program at UBC.
Thank you, Maddie. Okay. Nice to meet everyone. Thank you so much for being involved with this really important work that we've been really want to acknowledge Kai Kaufman, because I wouldn't be able to do a lot of this work if it wasn't for her and her wonderful support. I just wanted to just give a basis of why this research work was started. In 2015 to 2017, I was a band administrator for Lytton First Nation. And I didn't know that when you're the band administrator, you're actually in charge of response to fires. And so we had a huge fire in our nation. As you know, we had one recently in 2021, which burnt our entire town down. However, prior to that in 2017, we had a huge fire. It was taking over all our hills. And I was driving along in the valley. My aunt was in her house still, and there was smoke, black smoke coming down the mountains. And you could see it coming down in the mountains, and you could see elders in their houses still. And the smoke was over their houses. And I thought, they shouldn't be there. So we're evacuating people because of the fire, but we weren't evacuating people because of the smoke. And so when you have elders and children, and then the other thing I noticed, because the fire went on for 4 or 5 days, we have fires every year. It's very normal in our nation. We broke a record today, 30 degrees Celsius in Lytton. So it's a very hot place. So fire is just a natural part of our forest. So I thought, wow, geez. And then I saw people outside playing softball and back at the school. And I thought, don't they know that, you can't breathe. As soon as you can see smoke, that means the particulate matter is greater than 2.5. And so, which means it's damaging to your lungs. So we have a very strong understanding of water quality, when to drink water, when not to drink. We get warnings, but for air quality, we don't get the same warnings. When I coached in Florida on the football field, we would see clouds come towards the field, and we'd wait until there were 4 steamboats apart. So you go 1 steamboat, 2 steamboat, 3 steamboat, 4 steamboat. As soon as you hear lightning and thunder, closer than 4 steamboats, it was time to evacuate the field, because a lightning struck would hit the field, and it would actually, because people had cleats on, you could actually get hurt. So we had a very big awareness of weather in Florida with lightning storms, and a very big awareness about quality of water. But when it came to air quality, there was definitely a gap. Think about when you go into a sweat lodge, when you have the grandfathers come in, and if you're sitting in the closer circle, you have the, people put medicine on, when you come out, you have like can have a lot of soot in your lungs, right? So, so it's really important. And I'm really honored to be part of this research work at UBC. So as we know, water is sacred air. As we know, sacred air is a life-giving force necessary for survival. The element of air stands for the life force that brings us all people into existence, from the first breath to our last breath. So thinking about, I'm doing a lot of breath therapy work, really learning how to oxygenate my body. So I think back in the day, we learned how to breathe in 5 seconds and let go for 3 to reduce anxiety. Everyone has a different second maybe at that, but I teach my child that. With breath therapy, is you inhale and you exhale before you finish the inhale. So it's like, And you do that for a whole hour. And what it does is delivers oxygen to your tissues to help you revitalize your spirit. So sacred water. For our people, water is viewed as a living entity with medicine and healing properties. Being in water, cleansing the water, drinking water is the best medicine. Water and the land that surrounds us must be respected and protected for our future generations. So Lytton is on the Fraser River. Sadly, we see a lot of things that's pumped into the river. And I know it was shared yesterday about that, the black shadow going up the river with a salmon. And when I moved to the States in 2000 to coach. I was coaching here first, but I was very strong, and I was the only female to let dip net. And the dip net is 20 feet long, wood wrapped, and you go down the river, you tie yourself to rock, and you have to scoop out, and you get one salmon per scoop. So I would take 22 salmon out, and I'd be good for the year. I'd give away 10, and I'd keep 12, and I eat one salmon every 2 weeks, and I'd have it first baked, and then became a patty, and then it became sauce. I lived off it while I was in school. And so when I came back in 2005, I went down to dip net, and I was dipping and dipping and dipping and dipping, and I didn't catch anything. And it was tragic, So our water is changing in temperature, is changing in how it sustains our way of living. So it's really important to think about water as being sacred and not to take it for granted. Again, fire is sacred. So this is something really important. First, I think from a cultural perspective, in our community, we smudge. We have abundance of sage. And so we typically use sage, or we use other medicines in our community. We use tobacco, which is more from back east, but we do grow tobacco as well to help cleanse. Here on the island, people will use cedar branches to brush off that are still in the tree, where we will actually burn cedar. So everyone has different ways of using medicines, but fire is one of the places of igniting it. Fire is also really healing. To have a fire in your home or having a fire in a sweat lodge really brings you back to traditional ways of knowing that we practiced for thousands of years. And again, as I mentioned, fires are natural in Lytton. They are something that happen all the time. It helps clear the ground. When the wildfire happened in 2021, I have 66 acres up beside the village, and it burned all the pine needles off the ground. And I never knew that I had soil there. I thought it was all rocks. So I was like, oh, wow, look at all this soil. And it was the way in our Saskatoon berries, or our stockham, have come back in a plethora, which is really good for the animals. So fire helps renew. In our culture, we use fire in ceremony, and it helps us. We used to take our people before we were colonized. We would burn the bodies in the trees and help to kind of keep nature clean and making sure that our energy is not stuck in place. So reflections in wind, air, and fire. There are many variables like temperature, humidity, wind, speed, and direction that have influence on air quality. In Lytton, the wind is extremely strong, and that's why when the fire started, it was like poof. Typically, it'll change from 5 hectares to 500 hectares within 12 hours. So you always watch the wind, because you're like, which way is it going to blow? Because that's what's going to be taken out in the next day. So going to bed was really stressful, because from my home, I could see the fire moving, and I knew the wind was blowing that way. And so always knowing what do we have on the ground for fuel management. We have lots of pine needles, we have lots of wind. It's in August, our rivers dry up. So it's really important to be aware of our wind, air, and fire. And it changes within the season. So typically for us, wildfire season starts in March and usually ends in October. And so in March, we're all kind of, and we think about the first fire that started before the big one was someone put a cigarette out the window. So it's important to always be aware that they can happen, not just because it's dry or hot. So in Canada, most wildfires burn during the summer season, with the most intense fires often occurring when the weather is the hottest. I was in Lytton the day before the town burnt down. I was joking, I was cooking an egg on the road, thinking it's so hot here, it's 50 degrees Celsius. I went to go get in my car, and all my aero lights were on. My car would not drive. So because I had a newer car, and I had to wait till it cooled down around 6 o'clock to drive out. So the temperature really impacts how we can survive. So you have to be aware of the temperature, and people do pass away, and sadly, from smoke inhalation. So clean air and holistic health and wellness. Clean air considers the effects of climate change for the outside of the home. Clean air within the home must also be considered when thinking of holistic health and wellness. And the 4 components of holistic health and wellness are connected to clean air throughout all the seasons. So think about if you do have a wildfire, if you do have smoke here in Vancouver, we're affected. We had COVID was in 2020. In that September, the children were told to play outside because of COVID, and we had all the smoke coming up from Washington from the wildfires. And when you can see smoke, that's when it actually it impacts your lungs. So we Kai talked with the Air Quality Health Index. So for young children, for elders, they should not be outside when it's at a 7. So, and we hear our children were outside because of COVID. So it's really important to make a stand. I asked for HEPA filters in my child's class because HEPA filters do help clean the air inside. But if your house is wrapped by smoke, you have to be very aware of your safety and your health. So I'm really honored this year for IPAC to be asked to be partners with Health Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada to promote Clean Air Day. It will be held on June 7th, and it's to help bring awareness about clean air nationally. I'm also involved with the Smoke Project, which talks about they've witnessed that Indigenous populations in rural communities have more health concerns related to exposure to poor air quality. And they were talking about rural communities, but actually when you think about Vancouver, we have our downtown east side population. They actually have greater health concerns related to air quality because most of the people are homeless and outside. And so when you have smoke conditions, they do have suffering or higher rates in ER. And that article should come out in the next month. So I want you to think about air quality and what you can do to keep the air cleaner in your community for the next 7 generations. It's very difficult. We have a wood stove in our house in Lytton. My BC Hydro bill is $320 a month. So you think, oh, I'm going to do the wood stove. We got tons of wood everywhere, And to tell you the truth, I actually like the smell in October when the weather changes, and all of a sudden, boom, you can start smelling the wood stoves going again, right? It kind of makes you feel like you're at home, but you also have to consider what is the impacts on our climate. And so it's a really kind of a thing that we have to think about, what is the balance, right? And then this March, I have pine needles in my backyard, and typically we do fuel management. So we get our hose out and we burn the backyard out. So you also, boom, you see all these hills on fire doing fuel management. So again, that is a challenge in air quality. So those are some things to really consider. So how do we think about a clean air in the sense of spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, mental well-being, and physical well-being? And I know that Kai mentioned with that the medicine wheel. It's important to think about the impacts. We don't want to take things for granted. I think we've taken our rivers sometimes for granted, our oceans for granted. I know on the west coast of Vancouver Island here, we get a lot of debris from the rest of the world washes up on the shores here. It comes around, from Asia to Alaska, then lands on Vancouver Island here. So it's important to think about how are we taking care of our Mother Earth? And I think that's really it. I think I did really great. Maybe I got too fast. But I just really, does anybody have any questions at all? Yeah, it's a lot of work. And so it's really about, so if you think about yoga, have your different chakras, you can breathe through different areas. You have your heart chakra, your third eye, etc. But it's really about, so it's not that, it's that. And it rolls out of you, like I said. And it's when you do it, it's actually meditative. And if you close your eyes and you can get comfortable, some people lay on their back, some people lay on their sides. And what you want to think about is letting go of your thoughts. And what I really love is that I feel I go into a transformative state. So where you think about sometimes typically I transform into a crow. right away, or sometimes a wolf, and I become this animal breathing in a certain, and it just comes to me. It's not like I try, but that doesn't happen right away. I usually set my intentions at the beginning of breath therapy. So let's say I want to set intentions like I'm doing breath therapy on Monday. And my intentions are to re-energize myself, to so like let's say you have rituals, like indigenous populations, we always have rituals. So you have rituals of cleansing, rituals of healing, rituals of letting go. So having a ritual of breathing is having it purposeful with an intention. So you would state your intention before you go into it. That today I want to re-energize and bring in light into my body. So a lot of times we think about letting go of darkness or letting go of things that are sticking to us, like anger or sadness or grieving. It kind of sits usually in your core. You have this letting go of medicines, with rituals, whether it's a bath, smudging. Sometimes you do that, but then you have to bring in light. So just because you let go of things doesn't mean you are healed, because we always haven't been exposed to things, daily. So one of the things someone said to me is stop wearing the color black. So I have to work on that still, because I know Kai's laughing. But I was like, I thought I would start wearing we're trying to wear pink more often than other colors. But because you think light would absorb color, but actually having color brings in light. And so when you do, one of the things you can do as well is there's certain rocks you can use, like salts or selenite. They help take away anybody's energy that you pick up. So, and a lot of the work I do in my community is around health and wellness or for healing. And so you always have to bring in spiritual, whatever it means for you. And so to breathe is like, you have to, and it's kind of more of a really purposeful, it's like it's a cycle around, versus like and when you're doing yoga or like chair yoga or meditative, you can do that. And actually thinking, like I was teaching chair yoga and you're in a position, you can do that. So it can be like standard really often with breath therapy, it's more about bringing that oxygen to all and you actually are really energized after. It's like it's not like having a coffee, but it's more like an alertness, and you are able to kind of restart your way. Like I find that now that I'm older, I need to really work on that, because when I was younger, I was so hyper that it was just came to me naturally. But as you older, you have a greater awareness of, like when people share from their heart, I feel more open to it. Like, when Randy Ermiskin shared this morning, I wanted to cry like so many times, because it was just, you have that, you kind of let go of that ego more, and you're more open to hearing things and having awareness. So sacred air is healing, and it's something you can do whether you're having a massage or meditating or yoga, or you're just driving. And I teach my daughter how to do this anxiety one. So whenever she gets upset, I'm like, okay, let's breathe. And it's like refocusing and making you present in the moment. So yeah, hopefully that answered. But does anybody else should do breath therapy or breath work? You try it? There's lots of really great YouTube videos, and it's really great to do with things like the ocean, things that are rhythmic. So the beautiful thing about physical activity, when you do low intensity, low impact activity, it helps with meditative thinking. So I know before, like, yes, you were sharing some of the activities, but if you're doing like walking or swimming or paddling or weaving, when you can disengage from the activity, and you're doing it automatically, your brain goes into the place that helps with problem solving, and meditative thinking. And so that's something we all know, right, around being physically active. So physical activity can help with anxiety, help with stress, help with depression. It's also going to help with celebrating. Like powwow dancing is a way to celebrate life, to bring in joy in your life. So a lot of times we think about letting go of anger or healing and grieving, but sometimes you want to also have intentions about celebrating and bringing in joy, and actually say, I am happy. I am happy. Like, how often do you hear people say, I am happy? And so it's a really important thing to kind of practice and bring into your way of being and passing those teachings on to the next generation. Because sometimes we get into this place of like, and the other thing for physical activity is great for anger, like digging ditches or chopping and doing things where you can actually make noise. Because in colonization, we stopped making noise, so it's like, to throw, make animal noises or go in the forest and really be expressive and letting that anger out or letting that, whatever that is, out of your body. And you can see sometimes with people, I don't know if you've seen them before, if they're angry, it's almost like this monster comes out of their head. You kind of look at them like, whoa, they're angry. Like they've got rage, right? And that's a place where they've and for them to let go of that is really be, in the water or rocks, or just really having that emotional connection to physical activity is important for healing. So sacred air, sacred water, sacred land. And everyone has different teachings. Any other questions? Yeah, everyone's lungs, depending on how much damage they have, they always are regenerating. Like alveoli have you have your nerve cells that secrete the liquid that help with the passing of oxygen. They will all, if lungs you don't have a disease, will heal themselves. It's just that you want to be aware. Like if I'm in a sweat lodge, I go more in the back now, but life is life. You're never going to protect yourself from everything crossing the street, you have to be aware of exhausting. When I smell stuff, I'm very aware now if I'm smelling propane gas, when I'm smelling, first of all, it's dangerous, but that means I'm inhaling it. If I can smell something, I'm inhaling it. It's going into my body. So having that real conscious of clean air and why it's really important because some parts of your body only regenerate 70 times in your lifetime. And the more things you impacted from the environment that are hard on your body, it causes your body to go in more stress. So, and it's proven scientifically, like being in the forest or by waterfalls helps with recovery. Scientifically, so if you're an Olympic athlete, if you go into by a waterfall, there's more negative ions that help with recovery in your brain and your body physiologically. So being in the forest and by waterfalls are the best things to help with physical and mental and emotional and spiritual recovery. And it's proven scientifically. Not that we need that. Yeah, Lawrence Armstrong, not the cyclist. He is an exercise physiologist who wrote a whole book about it. And so, when people talk about those rose salts, how it changes the ions in a room. So when you have static electricity, that means you have more positive ions. You really want more negative ions. So you get static, that means it's more positive ions, which does not help with recovery physically, and it actually has emotional. I thought that was really interesting when I read about that. I read that book way back when in 2000. So the book would have been published in the year 2000 on environmental physiology. And it was really focused on Olympic athletes and the recovery from high intensity competition. And so being in the water, magnesium is one of those, when you have a bath, the Epsom salt, magnesium is important for relaxation. It's really good for your body. And so I use it as a scrub to get rid of anything negative in my life intentionally, and then have it go away, but it actually physically balances you as well. And then, and magnesium is one of those salts that we learn in our community is also really good for a cleansing of energy. So when you have a bath in it, you're doing, and you get nice skin too. Thank you, everyone. I could talk forever. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Miles, and thank you, Kai, for a great presentation. On behalf of the Indigenous Studies and Cultural Circle, I'd like to thank everyone for joining this presentation today. We will now be breaking for lunch, and the next presentation or the next session will begin at 1:15 as scheduled.
Yes, as scheduled. So I think that the presentation downstairs, they went over 20 minutes. So I'm not too sure what that's going to look like at time.